It was a quiet October morning in Scarborough, Ontario, when a chilling 911 call shattered the calm. A man's trembling voice reported that his pregnant wife was unresponsive in the bathtub. On the surface, it sounded like a heartbreaking accident, a tragic moment of life slipping away too soon. But something about that call felt wrong. The caller, 28-year-old Philip Grandine, claimed he had just returned from a jog to find his wife, Anna, motionless in the water. Yet his tone was strangely calm, his words rehearsed. And when the dispatcher urged him to pull her from the tub, he hesitated, saying she was too slippery. To those listening, that hesitation spoke louder than anything else. Why did not he try harder to save her? Why was there no panic in his voice, no rush of desperation? As paramedics raced to the scene, a story was beginning to form, one that would uncover betrayal, deception, and the dark side of a man who once preached faith and virtue. Anna was not just any woman. She was a loving wife, a daughter, a sister, and soon-to-be mother, filled with hope for the future. She had devoted her life to kindness and spirituality, always believing in forgiveness, even for those who hurt her. Friends described her as radiant, the kind of person whose smile could light up a room. But behind that warmth, something sinister had begun to unfold within her own home. Her husband, Philip, was not a stranger to admiration either. To the outside world, he was the perfect man, a respected pastor, caring nurse, and a pillar of his community. Yet, the image he built so carefully began to crumble under the weight of secrets he could no longer hide. When Anna discovered his double life, one filled with deceit and forbidden desire, she chose compassion over anger. She sought help. She believed in redemption. But sometimes, faith can save you from the darkness in someone else's heart. As investigators began to piece together the truth, every detail from that morning, the calm 911 call, the lack of urgency, the untouched towels, began to make sense in the most unsettling way. This was not an accident. It was something much more disturbing. Over the next few minutes, we will uncover the hidden truth behind one of Canada's most haunting real-life cases, a story of love, betrayal, and justice delayed but not denied. If you are drawn to true stories that reveal the depths of human nature, both its beauty and its darkness, stay with us. And before we begin, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this again. Each case we explore is more than just a mystery. It is a reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how truth always finds its way to the surface. From the outside, Philip and Anna Grandine looked like the embodiment of a loving, faithful couple. Their lives seemed blessed, a marriage built on shared beliefs, quiet devotion, and the promise of a growing family. To those who knew them, they were the couple who always smiled at church gatherings, who prayed together before meals, who seemed to have found both love and purpose in one another. Philip was admired as a young pastor whose sermons inspired hope, while Anna, a gentle Filipino immigrant, embodied grace and kindness. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, who brought food to neighbors in need, and who spoke about faith not as duty, but as gratitude. Their love story began in a small church community, where faith connected them long before romance did. Anna had come to Canada with her family years earlier, full of dreams and a desire to build a better life. She worked hard, studied harder, and carried a lightness that made people around her feel safe. When she met Philip, she saw in him not just charm, but conviction, a man whose confidence came from his calling. He was a pastor, a spiritual guide, and later, a nurse. To Anna, that combination of compassion and intellect felt like destiny. Within a few years, they were married, ready to serve both their congregation and each other with humility and love. They settled into a modest bungalow in Scarborough, a quiet suburb that suited their peaceful lives. Their neighbors described them as the kind of couple who waved good morning, who watered their garden together, who seemed untouched by the noise of the world. When Anna learned she was pregnant, joy radiated through their home. She nicknamed the baby Jelly Ding, a playful name that reflected her tender sense of humor. She decorated the nursery with pastel tones, folded clothes, and whispered prayers of gratitude each night. For her, this child was a miracle, proof that patience and faith could bring new beginnings. But beneath the calm surface of their marriage, small cracks had begun to form, cracks no one could see, not even Anna. Philip's life as a pastor had brought him admiration, yet it also came with pressures he struggled to manage. He often spoke about discipline, about purity, about walking in the light. But the same walls that protected his public image also hid his private weaknesses. He carried secrets that clashed with everything he preached. Slowly, those secrets began to take shape: late nights online, messages that crossed boundaries, moments of temptation that grew into something darker. Anna, intuitive and gentle, began to notice the changes. He became distant, his smile thinner, his sermons less inspired. When she tried to reach him, he brushed it off as stress. Still, she prayed for him every night, asking God to ease whatever burden weighed on his heart. She believed that love could heal, that honesty would return in time. But the truth, when it finally came, struck harder than she could have imagined. In the summer of 2011, Anna discovered that Philip had been unfaithful, not with a stranger, but with someone from their own church community, a woman she had once considered a friend. The betrayal cut deeply, not just because of the affair itself, but because it shattered everything she believed their marriage stood for. For days, she said little, retreating into silence, processing what could not easily be understood. When she finally confronted Philip, she did not scream or rage. Instead, she asked the one question that lingered in her heart. Philip, cornered by his own choices, wept and promised change. He claimed weakness, not malice. He begged for forgiveness, and in her infinite compassion, Anna gave it. Friends later recalled that even in pain, she spoke about redemption, about wanting to save their marriage, not destroy it. To her, love was not something you abandoned when it became difficult. She turned to faith, to counseling, to the belief that what was broken could be rebuilt. Together, they began therapy with a trusted friend, Pastor Stephen, who offered them weekly sessions. On the surface, Philip seemed willing. He listened, nodded, even resigned from his pastoral duties to focus on healing. But beneath that facade, something else was happening. He was living a double life, presenting repentance in public while maintaining his secret affair in private. To the world, he was a man seeking forgiveness behind doors. He was still chasing the same forbidden comfort that had destroyed his wife's trust. Anna's hope, however, remained unshaken. She continued to believe in him, even when others warned her to be careful. She was carrying their child, and she wanted to give her baby a family built on peace, not resentment. Her letters from that time reflected both vulnerability and strength, a woman who knew heartbreak but refused to surrender to bitterness. Yet her body began to betray signs of strain, fatigue, dizziness, moments of unexplained nausea. At first, she dismissed them as normal symptoms of pregnancy, but deep down, something felt off. As the weeks passed, the emotional distance between them grew wider, the air heavier with unspoken fear. Philip had mastered the art of calmness, his charm concealing a coldness that even Anna began to sense. And then, One October morning, the illusion of a perfect marriage collapsed entirely. In the quiet of their Scarborough home, where prayers once echoed and laughter once filled the rooms, a tragedy unfolded that would leave a community in disbelief. What began as a story of faith and devotion was about to unravel into one of Canada's most haunting tales, a story where love was used as a mask, and trust became the most dangerous weapon of all. The revelation came quietly, like a shadow creeping into the corners of Anna's peaceful world. She had always trusted Philip, her husband, her partner in faith, her companion in every prayer and decision. But one evening, as she sat alone in their living room, something compelled her to open his laptop, not from suspicion, but from a strange unease she could not name. What she found shattered the foundation of everything she believed about their marriage. There were messages exchanged with another woman from their own church. Words too familiar, too intimate to be mistaken. The name on the screen belonged to someone she had once embraced as a sister in Christ. Someone she had prayed beside during Sunday worship. The betrayal was no longer just personal. It felt like a wound carved into her very faith. As she tried to comprehend the depth of what she had discovered, her heart began to uncover even darker truths. Hidden files, private histories, and a pattern that spoke of something more than a single mistake. It revealed a quiet addiction Philip had been nurturing for years, an obsession that contradicted everything he preached. For Anna, it was not only the infidelity that broke her, but the realization that the man she trusted with her soul had been living a double life. She confronted him that night, her voice trembling but calm. Philip denied at first, then wept, his guilt spilling out in fragments of confession. He begged for forgiveness, blaming weakness, temptation, and the pressures of his ministry. Anna, whose heart had always leaned toward mercy, listened through the pain. Even as tears blurred her vision, she could not bring herself to hate him. She believed that redemption was possible, that people could change when given love and understanding. In the quiet hours after their confrontation, she prayed for strength, not just for herself, but for the man who had betrayed her. The next morning, she made a decision that defined her grace. Rather than leaving him, she sought help. She called Pastor Stephen, a trusted counselor and friend of their church, explaining that they needed guidance. To her, counseling was not a sign of weakness, but of faith in the possibility of restoration. She was determined to rebuild what had been broken, even if it meant carrying the weight of pain in silence. Week after week, she attended those counseling sessions with Philip, sitting beside him in small, dimly lit rooms where they were encouraged to speak openly. She talked about her heartbreak, her loss of trust, her hope that forgiveness could lead to healing. Philip nodded, held her hand, and promised that the affair was over. He swore that his past mistakes were behind him, that he wanted to become the man she believed him to be. In public, he seemed renewed, a husband devoted once more, a man humbled by his own downfall. Their friends noticed the change and spoke of it with admiration. But only Philip knew that his repentance was an act, a careful performance meant to maintain appearances while his deception continued in secret. At home, Anna poured her energy into creating peace again. She focused on her pregnancy, preparing for their child with the same love and optimism that had always guided her. She placed soft toys in the nursery, painted the walls in warm colors, and often hummed lullabies under her breath. When she felt the baby move, she took it as a sign that hope was still alive. To her, forgiveness was not just a word, it was an act of faith, a bridge between what was broken and what could still be beautiful. But something within her began to change. Though she tried to smile, a quiet sadness lingered in her eyes. The trust she had once given freely no longer came naturally. There were moments when she caught Philip staring blankly into space, his phone always close, his demeanor oddly distant. When she asked if he was all right, he would assure her that he was simply tired from work, that the stress of rebuilding had taken its toll. Yet beneath his calm exterior, guilt was tightening its grip. He was still communicating with the other woman, still consumed by the very behaviors he had promised to leave behind. Anna, unaware of the ongoing deceit, clung to hope as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. She journaled daily, writing prayers for their marriage, for their unborn child, for the strength to forgive even when it hurt. Her words reflected both her faith and her fear, a quiet struggle between love and truth. "Lord," she once wrote, "help me see the good in him even when I cannot see it in myself." Those who knew her during this time remembered her as radiant but fragile, a woman who smiled through sorrow because she believed light could still break through darkness. As autumn settled over Toronto, the air grew colder, and so did the silence between them. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt heavy with unspoken tension. Anna tried to bridge the gap with gentleness, cooking his favorite meals, planning small surprises, suggesting they pray together more often. Philip responded with polite affection, but his heart was elsewhere. The lies had become a burden too heavy to carry, yet he refused to let go. He had built a life around appearances, and losing control terrified him more than losing the truth. Anna sensed something slipping away but could not name it. She prayed harder, believing that her love could still save him. In her mind, their marriage was worth fighting for, not just for themselves but for the child growing inside her. She dreamed of a future where they would hold their baby and begin again, where forgiveness would finally bring peace. But destiny had other plans. Beneath the surface of their fragile reconciliation, a storm was brewing, one that would soon turn their story from a tale of redemption into one of unimaginable tragedy. For Anna, faith was the only anchor she had left. For Philip, deception had already become a trap from which there was no return. It was a crisp autumn morning when Anna woke up feeling strangely heavy, as if her body was no longer her own. The air in the house was still, the faint scent of fruit lingering in the kitchen from the smoothie Philip had made for her earlier. He had insisted on preparing it himself, smiling as he handed her the glass, assuring her it would help with her morning sickness. She trusted him. How could she not, after all the counseling sessions, all the promises of change? She had started to believe that their lives were finally moving toward peace. Yet, within minutes of finishing the drink, a strange drowsiness began to take over, her vision blurring, her heartbeat slowing as the room started to spin. She tried to call his name, but her words came out as faint whispers, swallowed by the silence of the house. Philip appeared by her side, his expression unreadable, his movements calm and deliberate. He told her to lie down, that it was probably exhaustion from the pregnancy, and that she needed rest. But deep inside, Anna sensed that something was not right. She tried to stay awake, clutching her stomach as a wave of dizziness overcame her, her thoughts scattered like pieces of broken glass. Then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, she was in a hospital bed. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled her senses, and bright white lights stung her eyes. A nurse was checking her pulse, and Philip stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. He told her she had fainted, that it must have been due to stress. He spoke gently, reassuringly, but something in his tone felt distant, like a man rehearsing sympathy rather than feeling it. Doctor tests, concerned about the safety of both Anna and the baby. Her symptoms: the disorientation, the confusion, the muscle weakness pointed to something more than simple fatigue. Soon after, the test results revealed the presence of lorazepam in her system, a sedative commonly used to calm anxiety, but one known to be dangerous for pregnant women. The doctors were puzzled. Anna had no prescription for the drug, no medical reason to take it. When asked, she seemed just as confused as they were. Philip, however, appeared quick to respond. He suggested it might have been a mistake. Perhaps she had taken the wrong supplement, or someone at work had accidentally mixed her drink. His composure was unnerving, not frantic like a husband terrified for his wife, but composed, as though he had already prepared an explanation. The doctors, though suspicious, had no evidence of foul play. After a few days of monitoring, Anna was discharged with a warning to take better care of herself and avoid unknown substances. When she returned home, she was still weak, her mind clouded with uncertainty. She could not shake the feeling that something had been off about the entire incident. The smoothie, the sudden collapse, the drug she never touched. Yet she tried to silence her doubts. Philip was attentive in the days following, preparing her meals, checking on her constantly, ensuring she rested. He spoke soft, brought her flowers, and prayed with her before bed. To an outsider, he looked like the picture of a caring husband. But to Anna, his sudden devotion felt oddly timed, almost as if he was trying too hard to convince her and himself that everything was fine. Late at night, when the house fell quiet, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her hand resting on her growing belly. She whispered prayers to her unborn child, promising to protect it no matter what. Sometimes she caught glimpses of Philip standing in the doorway, watching her silently, his face half hidden in the dark. He would smile when he noticed her looking, then turn away without a word. Those moments sent a chill through her, but she refused to give in to fear. Her faith told her to trust, to forgive, to hope for redemption even when the heart faltered. Over the next few days, Anna tried to regain her strength. She spent time reading, journaling, and walking in the park near their home. To anyone who saw her, she seemed like a woman slowly finding peace after a difficult season. But inside, she carried the weight of unease she could not explain. Sometimes, as she sipped her tea or prepared her meals, she caught herself hesitating, wondering if she should accept anything Philip offered her without question. It was a thought that filled her with guilt, for it meant doubting the man she had vowed to trust again. Philip, on the other hand, seemed increasingly restless. His calm exterior masked an inner turmoil, one that had been building since the day Anna discovered his betrayal. The affair may have ended publicly, but in secret, his resentment toward her had grown into something darker, a quiet bitterness that twisted his thoughts. To him, Anna's forgiveness was not a gift. It was a mirror that reflected his shame, and rather than facing that truth, he sought to erase it. The night before her final day, Anna wrote in her journal again. Her words were tender, hopeful, unaware of what was to come. "I believe we are getting better," she wrote. "He's been so gentle lately. I feel like maybe we will be happy again when the baby comes. I want to believe that love can heal everything." She closed the book, placing it on her bedside table, and drifted into sleep with her hand over her heart. What she did not know was that the same man she had chosen to forgive was already planning her final moments. The hospital incident had not been a mistake. It was a test, one that proved how easy it was to make her vulnerable. And though Anna could not see it then, her trust had become the weapon that would soon be used against her. In the days that followed, the house was calm once more, almost eerily so. The smoothie glasses had been washed, the journal lay untouched, and the world outside continued unaware that beneath the roof of that quiet home, a tragedy was silently approaching. Anna believed she had survived the worst, but the truth, dark, deliberate, and merciless, was only just beginning to reveal itself. The investigation that followed Anna's death was slow at first, almost painfully so. In the beginning, the police treated it as a tragic accident. A young woman, heavily pregnant, slipping in her bathtub and drowning. There were no signs of struggle, no visible injuries. And Philip, the grieving husband, had appeared cooperative, soft-spoken, and composed. He stood before detectives with a sorrowful face and spoke of his wife in gentle tones, his eyes cast downward as though burdened by grief. To those who did not look too closely, he seemed like a man broken by loss. But to those who did, something in his demeanor felt off, too controlled, too calculated. In the days that followed, subtle details began to surface, details that did not fit the picture of an accident. The first was Anna's condition when paramedics arrived. Her body had been cold, suggesting she had been in the water far longer than Philip initially claimed. Then there was the position of her body, her head resting awkwardly against the edge of the tub, her arms limp in a way that did not align with a simple fall. Detectives began to question the timeline Philip had given, and soon his version of events began to unravel. When investigators examined his phone and computer, the illusion of the devoted husband collapsed completely. What they found turned the case from tragedy into horror. In the days leading up to Anna's death, Philip had conducted a series of online searches, late-at-night queries about the effects of sedatives, dosage limits, and how long certain drugs remained detectable in the bloodstream. He had even searched, chillingly, for how to drown someone without leaving signs of struggle. The pattern was unmistakable. It was not a random curiosity. It was research. Detectives also learned that Philip, as a nurse, had access to controlled medications at his workplace, including lorazepam, the same drug that had been found in Anna's system just days before her death. Pharmacy records showed discrepancies, small but telling, doses unaccounted for, bottles signed out under his name that were never returned. When confronted with the evidence, Philip tried to explain it away, claiming clerical errors, misplaced logs, misunderstandings. But the weight of it all was beginning to crush the image he had so carefully constructed. Still, justice would not come swiftly. It took months of gathering evidence before charges were finally laid. And even then, the case moved through the courts with agonizing slowness. Philip was first charged with first-degree murder, though his defense team immediately fought to have it reduced. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the online searches could have been for professional knowledge, that the lorazepam at work was accessible to others. It was a strategy that bought him time to adjust, time to manipulate, and time to delay the inevitable reckoning that awaited him. The trial drew public attention, especially because of Philip's background as a pastor and nurse. The community that had once admired him now watched in disbelief as the details of his double life were laid bare in court. The prosecution painted a portrait of a man driven by resentment and guilt, who saw his wife not as a partner but as an obstacle to the life he wanted. They detailed the affair, the deception, the drugging, and the online searches that revealed his intent. Each piece of evidence drew a clearer picture of premeditation, the careful planning behind an act disguised as an accident. The defense, on the other hand, clung to the narrative of a broken man caught in a tragic situation. They emphasized his emotional turmoil, his supposed remorse, and the possibility that Anna's death had been a self-inflicted accident brought on by stress and medication confusion. It was a theory that angered many, especially Anna's family, who sat in the courtroom each day, listening to her life being dissected and her memory twisted into doubt. After weeks of testimony and emotional witness accounts, the jury reached a verdict: guilty of manslaughter for Anna's loved ones. It was a bittersweet outcome. Justice had been acknowledged, but not fully served. Philip was sentenced to 15 years in prison, a sentence that many felt was far too lenient for the depth of his betrayal. But even that victory was short-lived. His lawyers immediately filed for appeal, citing errors in the jury's instructions and challenging the interpretation of the evidence. Years passed, and the case wound its way through the legal system like a ghost refusing to rest. Each appeal reopened old wounds for Anna's family, forcing them to relive the horror of her final days. Philip remained defiant, shifting his story, reinventing himself as the misunderstood husband rather than the orchestrator of his wife's demise. It seemed that even from behind bars, he continued to control the narrative, drawing out the pain of those he had already destroyed. Despite the legal delays, the forensic evidence remained unshakable. The timeline, the digital footprints, the toxicology results all pointed to one truth. Anna's death had not been an act of chance or divine will. It had been calculated, methodical, and cruelly disguised as compassion. What he had claimed to do for her peace had been nothing more than a final act of control, the ultimate silencing of the woman whose love he could never deserve. In the courtroom, during one of the final hearings, Anna's sister spoke through tears, her voice trembling as she addressed the man who had once promised to cherish her sibling. "You took from us someone who believed in forgiveness," she said. "She saw goodness in you when no one else could. And you used that against her." Her words echoed through the room, a haunting reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, could still speak truth to the silence he had left behind. By the time the last appeal was denied, more than a decade had passed since Anna's death. The world had moved on, but her story remained a quiet symbol of faith betrayed and courage remembered. The evidence that had once been buried beneath lies had finally spoken, louder than any sermon Philip had ever preached. And though no sentence could bring her back, the truth had prevailed, a truth written in data. In medicine, in the quiet determination of those who refused to let her memory fade. In the end, it was not the courtroom verdict that defined the story, but the resilience of a woman who had chosen love even when met with deceit. The evidence may have exposed the crime, but it was Anna's faith, unwavering even in her final moments, that revealed the deepest tragedy of all. That sometimes evil wears the calmest face. In 2022, more than a decade after that haunting October morning, the long, painful wait for justice finally reached its end. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Philip Grandine, once a pastor, a nurse, and a husband, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for the death of his wife, Anna. The air felt heavy with the weight of everything that had been lost. Not just a life, but a story of faith, forgiveness, and the cruel betrayal of both. Anna's family sat quietly, their hands clasped, their eyes filled with tears that had been held back for too many years. For them, justice had never been about vengeance. It was about truth, the truth Anna could no longer speak for herself. As Philip was led away in handcuffs, his face betrayed no emotion. For a man who had once stood before congregations preaching about compassion and redemption, his silence now felt colder than ever. Behind him, the courtroom buzzed with whispers, people struggling to reconcile the man they had once admired with the monster revealed through evidence and time. It was the end of a story that should never have existed, a tragedy that could have been prevented if the signs of manipulation and abuse had been taken seriously. Outside the courthouse, Anna's sister spoke to reporters with a quiet dignity that mirrored the grace her sister had once shown. Anna believed in love, in faith, and in forgiveness, she said. She thought she could help him heal. But love should never be used as a weapon. Her story is not just about what was lost, it is about what we must learn. We have to listen. We have to see the warning signs. And we have to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Her words resonated far beyond that courthouse. They spoke for countless others, for those who suffer in silence, for those who believe forgiveness can fix everything, and for those who stay even when staying means danger. The case of Anna and Philip Grandine became more than a headline. It became a lesson in how easily appearances can deceive. It reminded people that darkness can hide behind gentle smiles, and that sometimes those who speak of salvation are the ones most in need of saving themselves. The tragedy struck a chord across Canada, sparking renewed conversations about domestic abuse, emotional manipulation, and the importance of early intervention. Lawmakers and advocacy groups began calling for stronger protections for vulnerable spouses, emphasizing that abuse is not always visible, it can live quietly in manipulation, in control, and in the subtle erosion of someone's confidence and hope. For Anna's family, healing did not come easily. They continued to celebrate her life in the small ways she would have loved by volunteering at church, helping women in crisis, and supporting organizations dedicated to preventing domestic violence. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, they gather to remember her warmth, her laughter, and her unwavering belief in goodness. To them, Anna's story is not just a tragedy, it is a testament to resilience and faith in the face of unimaginable betrayal. Even now, her journal entries preserved by her sister stand as quiet echoes of her heart, words filled with love, with prayers for peace, and with dreams for a future she never got to see. She had written about hope, about believing in people, and about trusting that love could heal even the deepest wounds. Reading those words today brings tears, not just for the pain she endured, but for the strength she showed until the very end. Philip's imprisonment brought a measure of closure, but not peace. No sentence could ever equal the loss of a woman like Anna. Yet her story continues to live on, inspiring others to speak out, to ask for help, and to understand that love without respect or safety is not love at all. In the years since the verdict, her name has become a quiet symbol of courage, a reminder that even in tragedy, truth has the power to rise above lies. And as her story spread beyond courtrooms and headlines, it touched people who had never known her, people who found in her journey the strength to leave their own painful situations, or to stand up for someone who could not. In thy, Anna's spirit continues to make a difference, guiding others toward light, even after her own was taken. So tonight, as we close this story, let it not just be about the cruelty of one man or the tragedy of one family, but about the strength of those who refuse to let love be twisted into something it was never meant to be. Let it be about Anna, a woman who believed in forgiveness, even when the world gave her every reason not to. Thank you for staying with us through this heartbreaking yet important story. If this touched you, if it made you think, or if you believe stories like Anna's deserve to be told, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Every story we share helps bring awareness to those who need it most. Together, we can make sure that Anna's voice, and the voices of countless others like hers, are never silenced again.